And welcome back to Janky AF and Year of the Aerostar, episode number 132. Well, it's been quite a while, and we have trying out a new setup here with OBS, so hopefully that simplifies things. A little inside baseball here behind the scenes. So I have my external mic here, which hopefully you can hear, dealing with some whole technological things, which is not really Beef Janky style, but we're trying to get into it and streamline things so we can do more Year of the Aerostars. Happy New Year! I just responded to a ton of comments, and we like to make these episodes evergreen, so we'll try not to put in too much intertextual stuff, blah, blah, blah. Anywho, we have a wonderful, wonderful Aerostar to talk about today. And as the story goes, we hit a deer with our 93 Aerostar. We have some insurance money to play with. If you've watched previous episodes, you know the narrative right now. And this Aerostar, I'll give it away. It has been sold, but it was so good that I had to archive it and talk about it. So even though we know we're not going to be buying this one, it's fun to fantasize about what if, because this one definitely was on the short list, and we didn't make it happen, but a very curious Aerostar with a lot of very interesting quirks and just sort of interesting tidbits. So why don't we get right into it? You can tell I'm a bit rusty, not having done this in a while. But maybe we're just always rusty. Rust and Jank are kind of run in similar circles sometimes, not all the time. Anywho, without further ado, here we have a 1995 Ford Aerostar passenger minivan. Listed originally for $1,500, marked down to $1,000, and now sold. Listed in Jefferson, Georgia. Jefferson, Georgia has a nice name to it. It kind of sounds like a person's name. My name is Jefferson, Georgia. Also, Georgia Jefferson could probably be a name as well. But it's got a nice, strong sounding name to it. And obviously, as you can see, the aesthetic sensibilities of this Aerostar are just absolutely off the charts. Let's get into the about this vehicle. As I apologize, you have to look at sort of my archive screen grabs here. It's not our usual format, but we'll make it work. Description, seller's description. Runs and drives, clean title, good work van or good family wagon, $1,500 cash. Well, apparently it sold for less than $1,500. And now I'm sort of already deciding whether I'm going to try to blurt this person's name out, but I guess it's all public information. It's been sold anyways, so I guess we'll just let it ride, because I think when I zoom in and out, it's going to be harder to blur something. It looks like that's as big as we can get anyways. Okay, real professional today on Year of the Aerostar. So, not a lot to say. However, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So whenever you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or whenever you see a car for sale for 1, 2, 3, 4, if you're not initiated into the Facebook marketplace world, Craigslist world, it means that that's a fake number. Unless, I always thought it'd be funny if you actually did have a car that was either for sale for $1,234 or the odometer was right at 123,456 miles. That would be just incredible to actually sell at that mileage, just as sort of a very intricate joke about marketplace. It would be, one of those weird things that doesn't really mean anything, but is sort of a very sophisticated, intricate joke to those who would understand. Neither here nor there. The point is we don't know what the mileage is. It says the exterior color is tan, the interior color is tan, the transmission is automatic. That's all the information we have on this Aerostar. But as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Incidentally, good work van or good family wagon, which is funny that they distinguish between van and wagon in these two instances, But good work van or good family wagon, I mean, that basically sums up the Aerostar. So even though it's brief, would Shakespeare say brevity is thy soul of wit? Not that we're joking around here, because this is very serious when we're talking about the Aerostar. But that could have been the Aerostar's slogan, good work van or good family wagon. Like, it's a dual purpose vehicle, and the duality is just really scratching the surface, because within that duality, you have many, many other dualities expanding. And it can really be just about anything you want it to be. But in essence, those are the two main divergences that the Aerostar takes. And as a work van, if you look at the early pamphlets, and I've just started buying up these pamphlets off eBay, if you look at the early pamphlets, there's a separate pamphlet for the Aerostar. And maybe the fact that they say wagon as opposed to van, I think actually may even be accurate to the Aerostar literature way back in the day, because they had a separate brochure for the Aerostar as a work van or as a family wagon, or I don't know, a family van. I don't know what they called it. I'll have to look, but there is that distinction between the two sort of main disciplines of the Aerostar, if you will. So this is sold, obviously. I didn't get to it in time, but there's aside from, as we'll scroll up here, aside from the very, sort of obvious, just, insane beauty of this van. Now let's get a nice full shot for you here. Wow. Like, just incredible. The brown and tan, or this creamy white, but then a little bit of even blue going on in here. I mean, how, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines here, and then 7, 8, 9, 10 with your 4 little pinstripes down at the bottom here. So many lines going on. And as I always say, horizontal lines look very good on an Aerostar, because the body design language is already horizontal lines. Of course, you have your big swooping curve on your front quarter panel and your window curves, but then, you have one just below your windows. You have obviously the roof line. You have another crease just about midway through. Then you have another crease where the two-tone color options were, which coincides with where the bumper lines come in. Even within the bumpers themselves, you have crease lines. So horizontal lines, which were kind of definitely an 80s and 90s thing, look very good. I love the wheels. I forget, it's like American Racing or whatever. This is like a sort of a standard wheel. I think they're very similar to the ones that are on my 1986 Aerostar. It's just sort of like a beefier truck style wheel. The two-tone, obviously amazing. And what's very interesting, this had to be a custom paint job, I can only assume, because even your grille and your headlight bezels are painted the primary body color on this. Now you have a little bit of, I don't know what's going on here, if that's like a rubber, if the paint's come off, whatever. But this was how the sport trims would be treated. Obviously, this is not a sport trim. It doesn't have the side skirts or the running boards. However, as we see, this Aerostar spec is very, very unique in many ways, and it kind of combines a lot of features of a lot of the different sort of cool specs. But I have to think this is all like sort of like a custom job. So grille and headlight bezels painted body color or primary body color. That's like sort of the first sort of interesting thing there, but just, I mean, drink it in. Like, look at this. Now this does look like actually a factory color. This does look like I believe it's called the Mocha Frost. This off-white was offered early on in like very early Aerostars. You get this like sort of creamy white as opposed to the more stark bleached white. But all bets are off. Who knows, what the heck this thing, if this was painted this way from the factory, we just don't really know. I'm trying to get a good look at the seats. I don't think they're Eddie Bauer seats. They look like your standard tan with maybe some brownish colored inserts, which is interesting. I suppose that could be the Eddie Bauer designation. To be quite honest with you, I've forgotten if we have interior pictures of this, but let's keep going through the exterior. Obviously, we have some, it looks like they've put in some mesh here to try to repair this bumper. Shout out again to the person who commented about the plastic welder. I just responded to all those, and that is like going to be a game changer for me. I went down a deep rabbit hole looking at plastic welders, and I think that we will get one and try to put our bumpers back together for our various Aerostars. But a little worse for wear. But again, with this plastic welder, I think that we will be able to do some repair on this and then, on ours. And that means that this bumper is not, it's not gone. Like I've seen ones in much worse condition, to be honest. So I think this is salvageable. So, just in terms of, here we get a little better view, look at the seats. Now those are Eddie Bauer seats. Wow. So this looks to be an Eddie Bauer edition, which is fascinating, which would actually make sense. Maybe Ford did something special for him at the factory, or maybe they just bought an Eddie Bauer edition and had this, vision for a custom paint job. Incidentally, this is pretty funny. It looks like the roof of a vehicle on its side here. I don't think it's an Aerostar, but so very interesting seller here. And this is one of those Aerostars where you're like, what is the story here? Presumably when this thing was first purchased and, possibly custom painted or even ordered as such from the factory, or this is some sort of appearance package on the Aerostar that I've just never seen before on the Eddie Bauer edition specifically. Like this must have been a pretty premium luxury vehicle when it, first got put into use, like the wheels. Yeah, again, this rubber, interesting if that's just, looks like it's kind of just popping out, that or maybe it has some paint fade there. But neither here nor there. I mean, can you imagine like when this thing was first spec'd or painted or whatever, ordered from the factory, like this must have been like a very, very, I don't want to say necessarily, I mean, I'm sure it wasn't cheap, but intentional. Someone took a lot of calculation and intention to specify this Aerostar, create this Aerostar in this specific vision. So it's just very interesting how it got to this point where it's like $1,000 vehicle that's, just trying to be gotten rid of. And that's always a very interesting story about a vehicle's life. I really hope whoever bought this is going to resurrect it or at least keep it going as is, because it's, no rust on it being a Georgia car. The paint work actually looks quite good. I mean, you'd have to fix up the bumpers and maybe a little tickle around these bezels. But other than that, the paint looks to be in quite nice condition. Could use a wash, obviously. The interior doesn't look terrible. So here, the next photo, when you can maybe already see it in the corner of your screen, but this is like the big boom reveal, sort of the major pièce de résistance on this Aerostar is obviously it is a passenger minivan. It has all the seats in it. It has the full interior. It's an extended, it's an Eddie Bauer, and yet it has the barn doors. It has the rear, double swing open barn doors from a cargo style Aerostar. Maybe, I mean, the only thing I can think of is that, like, if you knew someone at Ford, or maybe you could just call them up. Back in the day, these things were a lot more common. You could, like, kind of customize your vehicles a lot more. Today, where you just sort of, there's different packages and you have to sort of pick one and go with it. I think back in the day, if you just said, hey, like, I want a passenger Eddie Bauer Aerostar, but I want a custom paint job. I don't know what the paint job, but maybe I want a graphics package, or I want to send it to an outfitter. And also, I want a passenger minivan, but I want you to build one with barn doors. And they would probably take a cargo Aerostar and they would just upfit it with the full interior. It's not really that difficult to do if you're doing it from the factory and that's what you're going to be doing. In terms of all your interior moldings and all that stuff, I wouldn't imagine it's too hard to outfit it that way. So I'm guessing that's what happened here. I mean, that or they outfitted a cargo version, but it has all your glass and everything in it. So I think they probably just specified it to have barn doors, which in actuality, I think is a great thing. I would love an Aerostar with barn doors, because I do think if you're going to be carrying anything on top specifically, it's going to be easier to put stuff on top. And I don't even think this one has a roof rack, but it's maybe just easier to get in and out of in the back, whatever the reason may be. But I think actually barn doors, like on a lot of, like, think bigger SUVs, like I think the Excursion has kind of a lifting window and then barn doors on it. A lot of SUVs, I think the CRVs had the big single door that swung open on it. So, open swinging doors as opposed to like a lift gate or a hatchback is not an unheard of thing on larger passenger vehicles, utility vehicles. But I just think to see it here with all the graphics on it, and with the full interior and an Eddie Bauer edition, no less, is very, very striking. I think it's so cool. And then you add the paintwork on top of everything. I love the way the barn doors look with the Ford logo, the off-centered license plate holder, the door. And this is, I never really thought about this, but I think this door lever is just the same door lever that's on the, the front and side doors, maybe even the sliding door as well. So it's cool that they just repurposed that door handle and cut the, little bevel out here to allow your hand to get in there. It's nice that they didn't have to make a separate piece for that. Like, a lot of hatchbacks have like a lever or whatever, or barn doors have different handles on the back than they do on the sides of the doors. But they were like, no, let's just take a door handle from the door and put it in on the rear barn door. So I think that's just like a great, clever use of materials and is, efficient in terms of the building process. Being a 95, we have our full tri-colored tail lamps, which actually one of the brochures was bragging about. It's like one of the features of the vehicle is like tri-colored tail lights, which is like just funny. Obviously on the barn door versions, the cargo versions, as I would normally call it, you have these little hinges here. So the exterior of the vehicle is just a little bit different to accommodate for the hinge. And I think also that means the bumpers are a little bit different. Oh, here we actually do have interior shots. Wow, like this huge subwoofer in here. So it looks like maybe the kids inherited the car from their parents, decided to make it like some sort of party wagon here. And now for whatever reason they're selling it. But you can see this has full carpets in it, full plastic molding, giant subwoofer, and it looks like we even have the bucket seats, which is not only Eddie Bauer, but Eddie Bauer bucket seats, which is very, very cool. The bucket seats were always, I think, like an additional option. And I think in the early Aerostars, you could get them with only one bench seat. So I actually wonder if this never even had a rear bench seat, and if it just had two bucket chairs. Who knows? It's already a weird spec. Maybe they just said, we're only carrying 4 people, and then we want room for our stuff, for our subwoofer. Headliner looks a little worse for wear. As you can see, that's not uncommon in Aerostars. But honestly, your molding doesn't look bad. It's not peeling away or, warping or bending too badly here. So it doesn't look like probably a lot of moisture's been in this vehicle. Honestly, it's probably more dry heat and sun that's caused these rips and tears in the headliner. And then back here, probably shoving stuff in there or something. But you can see the, top hinges for the barn doors there. And rubber seal, very, very interesting. Again, your rear bumper here. Now I wonder about, and it almost looks like a little, that's interesting, a little funny. Apologies as I'm kind of navigating this preview. I'm not used to doing this as opposed to being on just the regular internet browser. I wonder how the barn doors close versus the hatchback, if it creates the same footprint down here. And it looks like this rubber pad here, I'm not sure if it's factory, but it does look like the fit and finish is a little bit wonky. Like they kind of had to make this work with a non-cargo interior with a cargo barn door spec. So I'm wondering if that's evidence of that, where they're like, well, how do we fit out the interior on it with cargo doors? And they're like, I'll just like make it work. So it seems like that's what's going on here. Next photo, and this is also cool because it looks like, again, I don't know if this is factory, but I would imagine on the barn doors in your just standard cargo issue Aerostar, I wonder if you had this release here. That's a door release. That's probably standard, but I think these little sort of leatherette pouches meant to sort of like gussy up the barn doors are probably different. Maybe this was, done through an outfitter. I don't know. And then also, I think the barn doors usually didn't have glass in them, as we see again this tipped over sideways vehicle with a seat belt attached to a chain, which is very interesting. I guess that's how they flipped it over. Neither here nor there, but always funny to see the background fodder, just get a sense of what's going on in this environment. This just to me looks a little rough and tumble. Like you just have these, exposed bolts, presumably holding in your glass here. So I think I'm trying to remember now if most cargo Aerostars I've seen, I don't think have rear glass in their barn doors. Maybe some do. Obviously, it couldn't have been that hard to do. But again, I just wonder how much of this was done from the factory and how much of this was done like by an outfitter or camping company, one of those things that was very common in sort of the 80s and 90s. Here we have another great picture of it. Pretty well documented, I gotta say. And what is that? Is that also a door release to open the door there? So that's kind of cool. But just so cool and curious to see. Oh, we have lots of pictures of the interior. I forgot how good these pictures were. It's been a while since I actually screen grabbed all these photos, as we have not recorded an episode in a while. Beautiful. I mean, it would be worth it alone just to buy this vehicle for these 4 Eddie Bauer seats. Obviously, your 2 fronts. Now, my question is always, can you use, if you take these captain's chairs, are these identical to the actual chairs in the seats in the front of the Aerostar? Do they just duplicate them and fit them to the rear? That would have been really smart if they're just completely interchangeable. I don't know if there's anything that differentiates a passenger captain's chair from, your actual front seats. If not, that'd be awesome, because then the 4 of them are just completely interchangeable. But I do love this iconic Eddie Bauer tree styling. And it's like one of those just things, if you know, you know. And I love that, usually these fabric in these seats was sort of like 2 different fabrics. So you'd have like a more tougher, wider thread in this area, and then the surrounding area would be this more like velour-like look. When they put this Eddie Bauer insignia in there, they took away the secondary material. So it's just another little unique thing where they differentiate themselves from your normal Aerostar seat. So I think that's very, very cool. And they weren't lying about tan. I mean, just acres of tan on this vehicle. We have a great front shot. Wonderful tan interior. Looks like you have some dome lights up here that don't look like factory dome lights. And you have the wooden crank windows. It's funny, this vehicle has crank windows on it. Crank windows good, of course, just in case you drive off of a pier. The interior of the front, a little more ragged and worse for wear. You can see a big crack in the door card there that had to get replaced, or sort of just screwed in with like a sheet metal screw. A lot of dirt and grime on your door pull here. And this sort of like wooden accent piece is very sort of a telltale sign of like an outfitter, a camping outfitter. As you would see, they would just like put wooden trim on everything to try to like gussy it up, which I think is just like funny, but why not, A lot of times they would do like a cup holder area here, center console, that would make it look nicer. So I'm guessing, if I had to put money on it, I would say this probably was done by some sort of outfitter. But that still leaves the question, if they spec'd it as a cargo van, then how would they have to buy the interior from Ford and then like outfit it themselves, or the outfitter would do it? I wonder. I still feel like maybe they were able to spec a passenger minivan with barn doors, but I don't know. There's only so much Aerostar sleuthing you can do, and in the end, you'd have to get like the VIN number, I guess, and run like maybe a Marty report, and that would be really fascinating to see a Marty report on this vehicle. If you happen to have bought this vehicle, please, I would love it if you reached out and told me the full story of what's going on here. So you have your factory little tan. I really do like the tan interiors on these. As much as I love a gray interior, the gold tan interior really just does sort of shine, especially in the slight discrepancy in color between your plastic pieces and your carpet pieces. I just think it looks wonderful. And then obviously your sort of black dashboard component, so it has a nice black and tan look to it. Okay, more, and this is another funny one. We have this, along with your subwoofer, we have this like custom speaker that's been I don't know what this does to your leg room in the vehicle, but it's been like painted and then unpainted, or they have this like built this custom build out to be able to fit this giant speaker in here. So obviously some customization happened, I'm guessing, after the initial customization of the vehicle. And it seems like you would just have to cut that door card to fit that in there. So I don't know how you go back from that. I mean, I guess you could find a tan door card if you really wanted to bring this back closer to stock. But then again, what is stock for this vehicle? That's the fascination of it. Another great shot of your interior. Again, Eddie Bauer seats, which is very, very cool. The driver's seat is usually going to be the most stained because you're spilling your coffee while you're driving it. You're just getting in and out more. Your steering wheel, that could probably be cleaned up. Passenger door card doesn't look too bad. It looks like we do have a similar style speaker on the other end, but just a fascinating, fascinating spec of this vehicle. I've never seen anything like it, and the fact that it was so cheap and available when I was sort of shopping, really truly the one that got away. And again, I apologize for this terrible ability to zoom in on this screen. But there you see, it looks like we have the 3-liter in there. The battery's been removed. And that's another interesting thing that you would think maybe with an Eddie Bauer spec, they would have opted to beef up to the 4-liter, but it looks like we do have a 3-liter in there, which is, more than capable to get your van moving down the road, but just interesting. Okay, so we have, 3-liter there. You can see spark plug gap spec and everything. So I guess they're just showing you that maybe to show that it has the 3-liter, just to confirm that. And we go back to the beginning here. So great pictures, accurate if brief description of the vehicle, and just a mystery. I mean, just incredible. I think we got to go back and take a look at this sort of like glory shot of it, and like I said before, drink it in. I mean, such a cool looking Aerostar. Obviously, it's like peak 80s, 90s, peak sort of Radwood and the 70s kind of calling back with the tan and the brown and the gold here, but then into the 80s and then into the 90s. I mean, it's right up there with the top 5 or 10 Aerostars aesthetically on the outside that I've ever seen. I just love this graphics package. I think it works tremendously well with the wheels. I love 80s and 90s wheels. Even if you look at like Lamborghinis and Mercedes from this era, it seemed to be in vogue now to make your slots of your wheel as skinny as you possibly can, I guess, to show off your painted brake rotors underneath, and maybe there is a ventilation concern, but it didn't seem like, you had supercars, the Jaguar XJ220, you had these supercars in the 90s that their wheels were just so much, they were still alloy wheels. It wasn't like a steel wheel, but they were just so much more beefier and the design's more comprehensive. Your Jaguar XK8 was another great, even going into the 2000s. I like those thick, beefy wheels where you don't see a ton of what's going on behind there, but the wheel just feels so much more solid. And again, if it's an alloy wheel, you want it to be an artistic piece in and of itself. Like, wheels are not a cheap part of the vehicle. And so I love these big, beefy wheels. They just look solid. They look like they can hold mass. And they work really well with sort of the rugged cargo sensibility of this vehicle while still having this very, very unmistakable and, for the time, quite sophisticated graphics pattern on it. And the fact that it's an Eddie Bauer edition, just tremendous. I mean, $1,000, like what could be cooler than this for $1,000? And then it says it runs and drives. I mean, yeah, you probably need a lot of work. You're going to need to like get the interior looking decent, maybe patch up the headliner and give it a good cleaning. But after that, I think you'd really be in business. The bumpers would take, quite a bit of TLC, but you can get them good, paint it up, and then you just have like quite an exquisite looking vehicle. And by the way, one that's more than capable as well for doing any number of things. With the barn doors, you want to haul lumber, or you want to, go on a fishing trip, camping trip, whatever it may be. All the things you see in these Aerostar commercials, if you've ever watched their advertisements from the era, like, you just, whatever you want to do, you can do it in this vehicle. And that's sort of brilliant. And while you're at it, you could easily, I mean, if you took this down to Miami and went out to dinner and parked this thing, near a fancy restaurant, I guarantee you it would get some looks, If you took this to a car show, you might even get more looks than there's a cool niche within car shows where rarity and novelty and prestige are these big things. But if you can have something that people are just not used to seeing, that in and of itself is a very valuable currency. So I think if you really got this thing looking minty and you took it to like a nice car show, you would get attention. People would want to talk to you about it. People would say, oh, I remember those. I love the comments I get on Janky saying, oh, we had an Aerostar. I learned to drive in an Aerostar. It's just like these vehicles are part of the 1990s American culture, whether people want to admit it or not. And you can say it's pedestrian, you can say it's ho-hum. But now, 20, 30, almost 40 years on, the nostalgia thing kicks in, and people just see it maybe in a different light, and they appreciate it a little bit more for what it was at the time and what it is now. And the fact that you can have all that provenance or provenance, and at the same time you can have something that right here and now is still cool just for what it is. And by the way, if you need to go to Home Depot and get a bunch of sheetrock, you could still do that. Like, it's like the kid in high school who's like a jock and an artist. It's like there's no bounds or limits or boundaries that are put on what this vehicle can be. And I think that's quite inspiring. That's something maybe we all aspire to. We don't want to be put in boxes. We don't want to have labels put on us. We want to just be who we are. And I'll tell you, riding in the driver's seat of an Aerostar, you can really start to identify with that. So that's my little, highfalutin, taking it all the way up to the top there with the meaning. But, again, to bring it all back down, just a pretty rad looking van. And for $1,000, again, if you want to get into the classic car game, find yourself an Aerostar, because they're just really cool. And it's only a matter of time till, their full true story is told. But there's lots of people out there that already know. And so, maybe we're just preaching to the choir already. So there you have it. Really glad that we got to capture this one. Sadly, we are not buying it. But again, if anyone knows or sees this thing in the wild, and I would love to just know the story of this Aerostar. I would love to have sort of a first right of refusal if it ever gets passed on to another owner. Hopefully it's still out there. If someone scrapped this thing, I would just be, devastated. But again, we have it in photos now, so in theory, you could always sort of recreate this look if you really wanted to. And I suppose I should leave it at that. Maybe we get one more nice shot of the front here where you can see really how much cream is in this. Funny, if you look at an Aerostar head on, you realize how the proportions of it, like the headlights are very low in the overall picture of it. You see it kind of from the side, and you're like, oh, the headlights are kind of like in the middle of the body. You realize how much of it is really above the bumper and the headlights, because it's at this slant or this angle. You don't really notice it when it's, from the side, but when you look at it straight on, you're sitting quite high up, but it's actually quite a plushy ride. And despite sort of sitting high up, quote unquote, it's not an extremely tall vehicle or a very wide one. So I said this in a lot of the comments, like, it really is just for the modern times the perfect size vehicle, because even it's a big passenger van or cargo van that can fit plywood and 7 people in it, it's very maneuverable, and it's very sort of easy to place on the road. It's easy to back up in for the most part. You can fit it in a normal size garage. So just, again, this vehicle has aged so well, because the more time goes on, vehicles get kind of like more bulbous. Larger trucks are just enormous. This is still a manageable size vehicle, and yet you can fit so much more in it than you can most modern cars with their swoopy lines and all that. So there you have it. Glad to be back here, hopefully getting more Year of the Aerostars in. We are in a new year, 2025, which will again be the Year of the Aerostar, and I really hope to get more and more episodes out there and really hit a stride. Had a wonderful commenter tell me there was one that he'd seen some in Jamaica. He or she had seen some in Jamaica, so I did look into classifieds in Jamaica. I think I have found one, so that's great for international segment. I would love to go do another Mexican residency, and there's just so many more Aerostars out there to look at, to dream about, and maybe even perhaps take home one day, because we do have this insurance money from the 93 Aerostar, and so we are sort of on the hunt, on the prowl, and hopefully the stars will align, to employ a very easy pun. So there you go. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Year of the Aerostar here on Janky AF. We will have another one for you coming very soon, and until then, Janky do thanky.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.